G'day, I'm Warwick Schiller and welcome back to another video in the Books That Have Influenced Me series. And the book I want to talk about today is a book called Waking the Tiger by a fellow named Peter Levine. And it's about healing trauma in humans, but it has to do with, the nervous system of all animals. But on the back of this book here, it says, Waking the Tiger offers a new and hopeful vision of trauma. It views the human animal as a unique being endowed with an instinctual capacity to heal as well as an intellectual spirit to harness this innate capacity. It also asks and answers an intriguing question. Why are animals in the wild, though threatened routinely, rarely traumatized? By understanding the dynamics that make wild animals virtually immune to traumatic symptoms, the mystery of human trauma is revealed. And it's, this book has really helped shape me as far as my own healing, but what it's really helped me is understanding how trauma works, and and trauma is not what happens to you, because wild animals have, they're threatened routinely and they're rarely traumatized. So trauma is not what happened to you. There's a saying that says trauma is not what happened to you, it's what happens inside you because of what happened to you. And it's really about getting stuck, and this book, it's about things getting stuck inside you instead of working through the process. And this book really has helped me with the way I go about things with horses. And I realized the way we've done things in the past to get horses to behave themselves and to be quiet and all that sort of stuff actually leaves some stuck trauma inside them. And it's almost made me go completely against a lot of things that I and a lot of people were taught. And I'll give you a good example. So we've got a young horse named Chance. He was born here, and when he was first born, you got to treat their umbilical cord and give an enema, and you get a hold of those foals and hold on to them so you can do those things. And when I got a hold of him and Robin treated him, he struggled and I was hanging on to him, and then Robin treated the thing. So what I did then, which is totally the opposite of what everybody's ever taught about horses, was I kept holding on to him and waited till he started to struggle again. And I didn't hold, and this is where people get this wrong because I've talked about it before, I didn't hold him till he struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled and then let go. I held on to him, and as he started to struggle, I let go. And it's all about completing the trauma cycle. Okay, in the Vietnam War, the medics had this saying, as they go in, so they come out. And you'd have a soldier come in from the battlefield, blown to pieces, and they'd be screaming their heads off, and they'd give them the anesthesia and put them under anesthesia to operate on them. And when they came out of the anesthesia, they were screaming their heads off. They were completing that trauma cycle. There's a really good video on YouTube, and it's actually talked about in this book, of some guys in maybe Alaska, maybe the Arctic, or it was tranquilizing polar bears out of a helicopter or a plane. They were putting tags on them to check their migration habits and all that sort of stuff. So they shoot this polar bear out of the helicopter or the plane, and he's galloping along, and this polar bear's running along, and he gets tranquilized and he's running along, and then he falls on his side. And so they land and they put the ear tag in him, that sort of thing, and they all stand back. And when he comes to running, and he finishes that flee cycle, and then he gets up and off he goes, and he doesn't have any trauma. And so, what I did with Chance was, instead of holding him till he stopped struggling, so he's basically in the freeze response a little bit, and leaving that little bit of freeze response in there, I held on until he struggled again. As he struggled, I let go. And so that completed that trauma cycle. And it sounds wacky. You'd think, well, that's going to teach him to struggle. He is the easiest horse to teach anything to I've ever had in my entire life. You've probably seen videos of the first time I went to load him in the trailer. Or I didn't go to load him in the trailer. I went to approach the trailer to start working on acclimatizing him to being around the trailer. And I was talking to the camera, and he climbed right into the trailer while I was talking to the camera. There's a picture that went around quite a bit. He was out here in the arena one day laying down. I went over and sat next to him, and then he actually lay completely down, and so I lay down there, and apparently I went to sleep. My son came out and took a picture of us laying out there together. And he's now 3, and I've just decided I'm going to start the process of starting him on the saddle. I'm not really going to do much riding with him yet, and so yesterday was the first day I've ever put the saddle on him. The first time I ever put the saddle pad on him, and I've never desensitized this horse. I've not ever desensitized him to a single thing. The saddle pad, the first time he saw the saddle pad, I just threw it on his back, and his response was like he'd been doing it all his life. When I put the saddle on, he's like he's been doing it all his life. When I first asked him to walk off with the saddle on, he walked off like he's been doing it all his life. And so it's, this book really helped me understand how trauma gets stuck in the body. And if you think about, and Chance is almost unlike any horse I've ever been around. And I think what happens with horses is we do a lot of little things that leave little bits of trauma stuck in there, and they all add up eventually to horse. Think about horses. People say, oh, horses are stiff and you've got to teach them to be not stiff. They're not stiff. That's a little bit of the freeze response. I remember one time I had someone bought me some sort of a warm blood dressage horse, and they had a bucking problem, and they unloaded it. We took it up to the round pen, we turned it loose, and I was in the round pen, and the lady was on the outside of the fence, and I had to tell me all the problems she had with this horse, and she said, oh, and one more thing, he's really stiff on the left. And funnily, as she said that, I turned and looked at this horse who was standing behind me. He was standing loose, and he just reached up and scratched his nose with his left hind foot. You know how much band a horse has got to have in his body to scratch his nose with his left hind foot? And so she was telling me he's stiff. All those things like that, stiffness, are just concern about being asked to do things. And Chance, she's the softest and supplest horse I've ever had any experience with training, and I haven't had to train any of that. And so this, understanding this book and how trauma works in the body, like I said, has been very influential with my healing journey, with my trauma, but so influential with what I do with the horses. And a lot of what I do with the horses has been really guided by ideas that this book gave me. So if you haven't read Waking the Tiger, fascinating book for both humans and their horses.